Hey, why don't we sleep together in the same bed tonight?
Huh? Yeah, sure.
Wait a minute.
What is it this time?
When you say sleep together, do you mean bringing Allison's bedding into our bedroom?
That would be a hassle to clean up. Why doesn't she just sleep in my bed?
In the same bed as you?
It's fine. My bed is big enough.
It's not about the size of the bed.
Are you going to complain like you did about the shower? Allison, do you not want to sleep with me? Huh? No, I don't mind.
See? She says it's fine.
My husband Stephen and daughter Allison are unusually close. Stephen has been divorced before and raised Allison on his own, so she probably trusts him a lot. But I think it's weird for a father and daughter to shower together and sleep in the same bed. Stephen and I have only just gotten married and started living together. So it's hard for me to suddenly criticize their habits. They might feel like I'm rejecting their way of doing things and get upset. I was left worrying about this for days on end. 2 years after we got married, Allison started middle school, but she and Stephen were still showering and sleeping together like always. I had thought about saying something to them, but then something happened that made me hesitate. About a month after Allison started middle school, they had a health check at school. I got called in by Allison's teacher to discuss the results. Normally, if there was a problem with the health check, they'd tell you to go to the hospital. I felt a deep sense of unease about being called in by the teacher.
As I mentioned before, it's about the hearing test, the teacher began. Does Allison have some kind of illness? I asked, worried.
I think Allison possibly has Dash. I was shocked by what the teacher told me. Now that I knew the cause of the issues in our household, I resolved to tackle them head on. I'm Lisa, a 35-year-old office worker. My husband Stephen is a salesman, and our daughter Allison just graduated elementary school and is on spring break right now. We're a completely ordinary family, about to reach the big milestone of Allison starting middle school. The only thing that sets us apart from other families is that Stephen has been divorced before, and Allison is his stepchild. But in this day and age when 1 in 3 couples gets divorced, that's hardly unusual. Stephen and I met 3 years ago at a dinner party. It was one of those events where people gathered to have drinks, and everyone was allowed to freely invite their friends. With 15 participants, it was a large group, and there were friends of friends mixed in, so about half of them were people I was meeting for the first time. Stephen was among those new acquaintances. Excuse me, is it okay if I sit here? I arrived late and this is the only seat available.
Oh, not at all. Please go ahead.
Stephen sat down next to me with an apologetic expression on his face and called the waiter over to order a beer. My first impression of Stephen was that he was the serious type. It was partly because he was wearing a suit, but more than that, it was the impression I got from our initial conversation. Were you late because of work?
No, I actually finished work early, but I went home first to help my daughter with her homework. She's 10 years old and has been struggling with math lately, so checking her homework has become a daily routine.
Wow, that's impressive. I bet your wife appreciates that.
Actually, I'm divorced.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's not a big deal at all, he reassured me.
Is your daughter home alone today?
She lives with my parents, so they're taking care of her today. I got permission from Allison after checking her homework before coming out.
As we were talking, the beer Stephen ordered was served. Some time had passed since the dinner party started, and groups had formed around us to chat. Stephen and I quietly clinked our glasses together, just the two of us. After that, he continued to brag about his daughter, talking about how straightforward and good-natured she was, and how she was a hard worker who put effort into her studies. Stephen seemed to cherish Allison immensely, and his life revolved entirely around her. I think Stephen was going through a busy period at work at the time. Even so, I was drawn to his kindness in prioritizing Allison. We exchanged contact information and started seeing each other even after the dinner party, and our relationship began. Once we started dating, given our age, we quickly began to think about marriage. However, for us to get married, building a relationship between Allison and me was a major prerequisite, requiring careful judgment and timing. In addition, Stephen had one more concern about Allison.
I think it'll be fine, but be careful not to try to get too close too quickly. I know. You had issues with your ex-wife.
Yeah. My ex-wife seemed to have developed postpartum depression and couldn't feel affection for Allison anymore. She started being cold to Allison. Allison might be sensitive to adult women or the existence of a mom. We'll have to actually meet and see how she reacts though.
Don't worry. I'll be mindful of keeping an appropriate distance.
When I met Allison for the first time, Stephen stoked my anxiety to no end. He put so much pressure on me that on the way to his parents' home to pick up Allison, I felt like my chest would explode from nervousness. But I suppose that was because Stephen cared about Allison that much. I placed my hand on my nearly bursting chest, took a deep breath, and somehow managed to calm myself down.
Lisa, over here.
Oh, wait a second.
Hey now, don't go running off suddenly, it's dangerous.
My anxiety had disappeared an hour after meeting Allison. When we arrived at the shopping mall, Allison took my hand and hurried towards the knick-knack store she had her eye on. Stephen following behind and cautioning Allison looked like a family scene no matter how you looked at it. In the car, she happily talked about school and her life at home with Stephen. Allison and I sat in the back seat while Stephen drove, but Allison talked about absolutely everything, so when I glanced at Stephen's face in the rearview mirror, he looked a little embarrassed. Also, as I had imagined even before meeting Allison, she and Stephen were very close. Dad, let me have some of that.
Again? I'm going to run out of mine.
Come on. I like that flavor too. Just give me one bite. Allison stole the ice cream Stephen was eating and, despite saying she'd only have one bite, she took 3 before returning it to him. The expression on her face at that moment was one of delight. When I was in elementary school, I disliked my dad for no reason. I apologize to all the dads out there, but I believe it's a daughter's destiny to dislike her dad. However, there are exceptions, and some daughters don't hate their dads. Allison seems to be one of them. Everyone around me irrationally disliked their dads, so Stephen and Allison's relationship appeared very refreshing to me. Seeing their bond allowed me to erase one of the many preconceptions I held. Since Stephen and Allison's relationship was good to begin with, and I was able to quickly build a relationship with Allison, we got married a year after we started dating. After the wedding, we rented an apartment and our life as a family of 3 began. As my first impression suggested, Stephen was serious and worked hard at his job. Allison was also an obedient and good kid. At this point, I thought we would continue to have a happy family life forever. However, this happiness was only superficial and would gradually crumble. When I started living with Stephen and Allison after getting married, I was surprised by something.
Allison, want to take a shower?
Yeah.
What?
While I was cleaning up the dishes after dinner, I heard an unbelievable conversation coming from the living room, so I quickly turned around to check on Stephen and Allison. The 2 of them were just getting up from the couch. It seems I didn't mishear. They were about to go take a shower together.
Wait. When you say you're going to take a shower, you mean together? Yeah, we always do on holidays or when I get home from work early, right?
Huh? Yeah, that's right.
Allison is 11 years old, you know? Just look at Allison. She's still in elementary school. And she's the one saying she wants to go in together. Is there a problem? Well, you're parent and child, and she's only 11, and she doesn't seem to mind. See, there's no problem, right? Let's go, Allison.
I couldn't say with confidence that it was wrong for Stephen and Allison to shower together. The two of them seemed to get along very well, and it appeared they had always done this. Was it my place to put a stop to it when I had just started living with them? They might feel bad, thinking I was denying their habit. Plus, I knew some kids who continued bathing with their parents even as they got older. Still conflicted, I went back to cleaning up. When the two came out of the shower, they sat together on the couch and happily started watching TV. They really do get along well. Watching them from the kitchen next to the living room, I figured that since Allison was already 11, she would probably start disliking showering with Stephen soon enough, so I decided it was fine not to say anything until then. With that, my worries about the shower were gone, but Stephen quickly created a new concern.
Want to sleep together tonight?
Yeah. Sure.
Wait.
I reflexively interrupted their conversation from where I was watching them at a distance. What is it this time?
When you say sleep together, do you mean bringing her bedding into our bedroom?
That would be a pain to put back. She can just sleep in my bed.
In the same bed?
It's fine. Allison is small, so there's plenty of space in one bed.
I'm not talking about the size of the bed.
Are you going to object to this too, like with the shower? Allison, do you not want to sleep with me? Huh? No, I don't mind.
See, Allison says it's fine.
Stephen headed to the bedroom with Allison like it was the most natural thing. When I went to the bedroom a bit later, the two of them were sleeping in the same bed. Seeing them sleeping peacefully, the worries I had decided not to mind about the shower started to resurface. I knew Stephen and Allison were very close since before I married him. Stephen cherishes Allison, and Allison probably relies on Stephen since she hasn't had a mom until now. But I never imagined they were close enough to shower and sleep together. I got into bed alone, torn about whether I should resolve this issue, and it took me longer than usual to fall asleep. The next day, I decided I should first confirm whether Allison really didn't mind showering and sleeping with Stephen.
Allison, were you happy showering with Dad yesterday?
Huh? Yeah.
You always go in together on Dad's days off and when he gets home early, right? He said he'll be late today, so you can't go in together. Are you disappointed?
I don't know.
Do your friends at school also shower with their dads? Or is it just you, Allison?
I don't know about my friends.
You don't dislike showering with Dad? Why are you asking that? Am I doing something bad?
I seem to have messed up the sense of distance in my haste. Because I asked too many questions, Allison, who was doing homework at the living room table, put away her study materials and went to her room looking sad. Stephen would be coming home late today, so Allison and I would have to eat dinner with just the two of us. At dinner time, I couldn't bring myself to talk to Allison due to the earlier awkwardness, and we finished our meal without conversing. The silent dinner table was quiet, with only the sound of dishes clinking. I turned up the TV volume just a little, to make the sound of the dishes less noticeable. Allison finished her dinner and returned to her room without a word. As I was cleaning up the dishes, feeling regretful, I heard the sound of the front door opening, indicating Stephen had come home. I quickly brought up my concerns about Allison to Stephen as he entered the living room.
Maybe she strongly felt that you were trying to be her mom when you asked her all those questions. She probably doesn't have a good impression of the word mom. That's why I told you to be careful about how close you get to Allison before we got married.
I was being careful before, but after getting married and living together, I may have gotten a bit carried away. I had subconsciously tried to suddenly become a mom to her. My chest tightened as I realized Stephen was right.
It would probably backfire if you try to get too close to Allison right now. I'll handle it, so you just lay low for a while.
Okay, I understand. I had no choice but to follow Stephen's advice. Stephen headed to Allison's room to talk to her. Unable to do anything, I could only sit in the living room and pray that my relationship with Allison would be repaired soon. After about 30 minutes, I heard the sound of Allison's bedroom door opening. Thinking Stephen was coming back, I looked towards the living room door. However, Stephen's footsteps didn't head towards the living room, but instead went in the direction of the shower. Moreover, I could hear Allison's voice as well. Allison had already taken a shower, but it seemed she was going to shower with Stephen again. I was sure they were having various conversations in the shower too. After a while, the two of them came out of the shower. Allison went to her room, and finally, Stephen returned to the living room. Eager to hear what happened, I immediately asked Stephen about his interaction with Allison as soon as I saw him.
How did it go?
Just as I thought, it was a mistake for you to suddenly act like her mom. I see. Of course. Don't get so down about it. She said things will go back to normal soon. I'll keep talking to Allison too. Please do. It seems like it would backfire if I try to talk to her too much. I silently thanked Stephen for his kindness. However, Stephen's next words once again made me question the situation. And you know, starting today, when I sleep with Allison, I'm going to go to her room instead of having her come to our bedroom.
Huh? Why is that?
Isn't it obvious? You think Allison wants to sleep in the same room as you when she's trying to distance herself from you? Oh, I guess you're right. Stephen's words about Allison wanting to keep her distance from me pierced my heart, causing intense pain. Stephen and Allison sleeping together, just the two of them. I didn't want to agree to it, but if I objected now, I would become the villain in this house, so I had no choice but to go along with Stephen in this situation. I silently nodded in agreement. Some time had passed since a wall had formed between Allison and me.
Mom, listen. When you open this tube, it makes a big, pleasant sound. Can you show me what's inside, and not the tube itself?
Allison had graduated from elementary school. The Allison who was an elementary school student until this morning was no longer one when she returned home. When the break ends, she will be a middle school student. Thanks to Stephen talking things through with Allison, my relationship with her had been repaired, and the problem was resolved. I was truly grateful to Stephen. However, my concerns remained the same even now.
We're going to shower together today, right?
Huh? Yeah.
Wait a minute, Allison is about to be a middle school student, you know? It's about time you two stop showering and sleeping together. That's not true, right? You'll keep showering with me a bit longer, won't you?
Stephen looked at Allison's face for confirmation, and she quietly nodded. After confirming Allison's agreement, Stephen turned to me with a proud expression on his face. See? She says it's fine, so it's okay, right? But you know how close Allison and I are, don't you? We're not like most parents and children out there. Stephen happily made plans to shower with Allison that evening, smiling gleefully. At this rate, he probably wouldn't stop sleeping in Allison's room with her either. Now that Allison was becoming a middle school student, I really didn't want her and Stephen to keep showering or sleeping together. However, according to Stephen, in order to repair my relationship with Allison, it was crucial for him to shower and sleep with her, closing the emotional distance between them as parent and child while talking things out. He also said he wanted to continue doing so as much as possible to understand Allison's feelings going forward. When he put it that way, I had no choice but to back down, as I couldn't say anything after he had helped mend my relationship with Allison. Still, although I had let it slide until now, I was starting to feel that this wasn't right.
Allison, I'm going to sleep in your room tonight, okay? Huh? Okay.
Allison replied, her expression not looking particularly happy. She was clearly confused. However, despite her confusion, she followed Stephen's words. I found it strange, but if I asked Allison about it now, it might make things awkward again. I was afraid of Allison giving me the cold shoulder again, especially after we had just repaired our relationship. So even though I was concerned about Allison, I couldn't bring myself to ask her about it. A few days after Allison started her break, a small incident occurred. I don't want any more.
What's wrong?
My stomach hurts a bit. Stephen was coming home late today, so Allison and I were having dinner together. However, Allison finished her meal after only about 3 bites.
You left about half yesterday too. Are you okay?
I'm fine. I think I'll feel better after I sleep.
If you don't have an appetite, should I make you some soup? We have bananas and apples, or I could go buy some yogurt.
I don't need any. I'm going to sleep.
I think it's better if you eat at least a little something. How about we go to the hospital tomorrow?
I told you I'll be fine after I sleep.
But your middle school entrance ceremony is coming up soon. I think it's better to get checked just in case.
I said it's fine. Leave me alone. Allison slammed the table hard and stood up with the momentum. She walked a bit unsteadily to her room. Did I misjudge the distance between us again? Being yelled at by Allison made me lose my appetite as well. I didn't feel like moving, so I just sat there in a daze for a while, staring at my and Allison's mostly unfinished meals. Then, I heard the sound of the front door opening. Stephen was home. I immediately consulted Stephen about Allison when he entered the living room.
Did you screw up again?
It seems so. But this time, all I did was worry about Allison's health.
Don't get too down. I'll go talk to her for you again.
I'm sorry. Please do. If I left it to Stephen, he'd probably repair my relationship with Allison. However, that also meant it would become even harder for me to stop Stephen and Allison from showering and sleeping together. Still, right now, I had no choice but to ask Stephen. I decided to rely on Stephen again this time. Stephen promptly headed to Allison's room, and today too, Stephen and Allison slept in the same room. The next day. Good morning. Mom, I'm sorry about yesterday.
I'm the one who should apologize. Now, let's have some breakfast.
As I thought, if I left it to Stephen, the problem got solved quickly. Although there was still a bit of awkwardness remaining, the issue was resolved in just one night. Stephen entered the living room a bit late. Once again, he gave me a proud look. I started to lose confidence as a mom, wondering if this was what the relationship between a parent and child connected by blood was like.
I'm home. Welcome back. How was school? Did you make any new friends?
Everyone's the same from elementary school, so nothing's changed even though we're in middle school now.
That makes sense. Well, how about your teacher?
My teacher is young and cute, like a big sister.
Isn't it rude to call your teacher that?
Everyone's saying it. They say she's really easy to talk to, like a neighborhood big sister. When the break ended, Allison became a middle school student. It's only been a few days since she started middle school, but so far, there doesn't seem to be any problems at school. The problems just keep piling up at home. Stephen and Allison showering and sleeping together. Me not being able to stop it. Allison's concerning expression when Stephen talks to her, and me not being able to confirm the reason for it. Me not being able to act like a mom and relying on Stephen whenever something happens. I had completely lost confidence and was half giving up on resolving these issues. However, when it became clear that the root of all these problems was just one thing, I found myself galvanized to tackle them head-on. About a month after Allison started middle school, the students underwent health checks. Apparently, Allison had an issue with her hearing test. It's not uncommon for problems to be found during school health checks, and most of the time, they do a re-examination at the hospital and are told there are no major issues. Allison also had a problem with her urine test when she was in elementary school, but she went to the hospital and came back saying there was no problem. I thought this hearing test would turn out the same way, but
It seems Allison had a problem with her hearing test.
they want her to get checked at the hospital?
Yeah, the hospital too, but the teacher said she wants to talk to us, so she asked us to come to the school. What does that mean? Did something happen right after she started school? Or did they actually find out she has a serious illness? If I had to guess, it's more likely Shaw has an illness. The teacher called me and told me to come. You don't think it could be a female-specific disease, do you? Didn't you ask on the phone? I did, but they said they'd give me the details at the school and wouldn't tell me. Well, if we're being called in, we have no choice but to go. You're right. We won't know anything until we hear what they have to say. My chest felt like it was about to explode, filled with anxiety from our inconclusive discussion. I couldn't sleep that night, my mind filled with unpleasant imaginings of Allison having a serious illness. The next day, I headed to the school to talk with the teacher. After school, I could hear the energetic voices of children putting their all into their club activities. I made my way through the lively sounds to the classroom where Allison spends her days. When I entered the classroom, the teacher was sitting alone in a chair. Thank you for taking the time to come. Please have a seat, the teacher said, guiding me to a chair. I had seen her at the entrance ceremony. But looking at her up close, I could see that Allison was right, she was young and cute. She was probably in her late 20s, or maybe even mid-20s. I could see why the students were fond of her and called her a neighborhood big sister. However, as we began to talk, her gaze shifted from that of a young woman to a teacher. As I mentioned in my message, it's about the hearing test. Does Allison have some kind of serious illness? I think Allison possibly has Dash. I was shocked by what the teacher told me. Now that I knew the cause of the various problems we'd been dealing with at home, I was determined to solve them in one fell swoop. That night, Allison and I waited together for Stephen to come home from work. I'm sure Allison is scared to talk to Stephen, but I hope she can endure it just this once. As I waited, watching Allison struggle with her fear, I heard the sound of the front door opening. Stephen was home. I'm back. What's going on? You both look frightened. Noticing the unusual atmosphere between Allison and me, Stephen stopped in his tracks as he entered the living room. He seemed on guard, but that didn't matter. I had already made up my mind to break down the wall he had built with his wariness. You've been taking advantage of Allison's feelings and making her do whatever you want, haven't you? Huh? What are you talking about? Allison told me everything. I told you not to say anything. Stephen's eyes turned sharp. He was clearly threatening Allison. It seemed his true colors were showing. Glared at by Stephen, Allison shrank back and began to tremble. Allison didn't seem able to say anything,
so I decided to speak for her.
I went to the school today and heard about the health checkup. They said Allison might have psychogenic hearing loss. Well, we won't know for sure until she sees a doctor. Psychogenic hearing loss? You mean she's going deaf? It doesn't seem to be that serious. Just some difficulty hearing. Apparently, some people don't even notice their hearing has gotten worse. Other symptoms can include loss of appetite, stomach pain, and unsteadiness. Isn't that for a doctor to determine? Why were you called to the school? This illness is said to be caused by psychological stress. For Allison, that psychological stress is you.
Since I had already said Allison told me everything, Stephen couldn't speak carelessly and seemed to be choosing his words carefully. I said everything, but he doesn't know how much of the situation I've grasped. However, he seems to be choosing his words too carefully, and no further words are coming from Stephen. But when I say everything, I really mean everything, so no matter how carefully Stephen chooses his words, it doesn't matter to me. I heard from the teacher and learned that the cause of all the problems piling up in our house was Stephen.
As I mentioned in my message, it's about the hearing test. Does Allison have some kind of serious illness? I think Allison possibly has psychogenic hearing loss. It's a condition where hearing becomes a bit difficult, and some people don't even notice it's happening. Then why was I called to the school?
This illness is said to be caused by psychological stress.
It can happen to children going through puberty or those who have just started a new school and are dealing with a change in environment. That's why I thought Allison, having just become a middle school student, might be feeling some stress and decided to talk to her. Did Allison tell you about it? She was reluctant to talk at first, but I convinced her to tell me.
I silently apologized to the teacher in my heart. Because she was young, my first impression was that she seemed unreliable. However, it seems the teacher managed to get Allison to open up about her troubles. I was able to reduce my preconceptions by one more. Allison had said the teacher was young and easy to talk to, but she probably also knows how to listen to students' concerns as a teacher. I couldn't help but think that the reason Allison and the others find her approachable is because she intentionally gets the students to talk about themselves.
Is it true that Allison sleeps together with her dad? Yes, it's true.
The teacher didn't mention the showers. Allison probably found it too embarrassing to talk about.
Allison says she reluctantly sleeps with her dad. But Allison says she doesn't mind sleeping with Stephen.
Allison can't go against her dad.
I'm sorry to ask, but Allison is a child from his previous marriage, right? And I heard Allison's mom suffered from postpartum depression? Yes, that's right. I heard about that from my husband too. It seems that Allison has been traumatized by her previous mom's coldness and her parents' divorce. From a young age, she's felt anxious that she might be abandoned by her parents someday. So she started doing whatever her dad said in order to avoid being abandoned.
Abandon? We would never.
Allison is in middle school now, so I think she understands she won't be easily abandoned. But the experiences of doing whatever her dad said from a young age to avoid being abandoned may have become so ingrained that she can't break free. So that's why she made that face when my husband talked to her, unable to refuse even though she wanted to. And the reason she yelled at me was because she was troubled and didn't know what to do. This is just my own theory based on what I heard from Allison. I think you understand Allison better than I do, so please try talking to her once.
I returned home, reflecting on how I had failed to understand Allison at all. Hearing the teacher's story, various things started to connect in my head, and I began to see the true nature of the problem. Upon getting home, I first apologized to Allison for not understanding her at all and promised I would absolutely never abandon her no matter what. Allison forgave me, and when I told her I had spoken with the teacher, she told me everything. Listening to Allison's story, I checked the answers to what I had been thinking on the way home from school. Most of what I had thought was correct.
So you were the cause of Allison's psychological stress. You noticed how she acted to avoid being disliked since she was little and took advantage of those feelings to make her do your bidding. It had already started when I first met Allison, hadn't it?
When you first met Allison? I don't remember something that long ago.
For you, ordering Allison around was so commonplace that you don't even remember it. Both Allison and I clearly recall it though. I was so happy when Allison warmed up to me right away when we first met. But apparently, you had told her to hold my hand, hug me and stuff to make a good impression on me. You even made her pretend to get along with you, didn't you?
Now that you mention it, I do feel like I made her do something like that.
At home, you showered together, slept together. I can't believe you would treat Allison however you pleased, knowing she couldn't defy you.
That's just that. It's not like I abused her or anything.
No, showering and sleeping together is clearly abuse.
That's not true. Allison didn't seem to mind. Right, Allison? Stephen shot Allison another sharp look. I felt like I had seen this exchange several times before. When Stephen would shower or sleep with Allison, he would sometimes phrase it like he was checking with her. However, this wasn't a real check, but rather a pressuring command. Glared at by Stephen, Allison began trembling again. At this rate, Allison might give in to Stephen again, so I decided to assist a little. I lightly tapped Allison's shoulder, encouraging her to look at my face. Our eyes met, and I conveyed with my gaze that no matter what, I was on Allison's side. My message seemed to get through, and Allison's shaking subsided. I hated showering and sleeping with Dad. I don't want to be with Dad anymore.
You say things like that?
To Stephen, Allison had been the ultimate yes man since she was little. He seemed surprised that Allison had said no for the first time. Stephen, who thought she would easily give in again if pressured, looked perplexed. However, Stephen's perplexed expression lasted only a moment before his villainous face returned. I see. My bad. So?
Should I stop giving orders to Allison then? You think that would solve anything? I'm divorcing you. And I'm taking custody of Allison.
What? Divorce?
Of course. You think I could entrust precious Allison to an abuser like you?
You say abuse, but I just learned for the first time that Allison hated it. If she had told me from the start, I would have stopped right away. Isn't it partly Allison's fault for not clearly saying no? Stephen laughed, claiming his actions weren't abuse. However, such excuses were unacceptable. Surely someone had warned me he might try to make excuses like this, so I was already prepared.
You know, sexual abuse of a child can be established even without sexual violence.
What? When I haven't abused her? Don't be ridiculous.
What you did falls under custodial indecency. When a custodian takes advantage of their influence to perform sexual acts on a child, it's a crime even with consent. That makes sense, doesn't it? A child is still mentally immature, and depending on the situation and environment, they can't always freely make decisions. This time, you exploited your position as Allison's dad and her desire to not be disliked by you to coerce her into showering and sleeping with you. Wouldn't that be considered custodial indecency?
No, but I checked with Allison to see if she hated it.
Even if Allison said it was fine, the moment you showered together, you were in the wrong.
No way. But I've heard the police and child services don't really act on these things. That's understandable. It'd be a huge hassle if they responded to every report. It'd be pointless even if you reported it. Wouldn't it be more realistic for us to discuss and resolve this ourselves? Stephen had been laughing earlier, but now he was visibly flustered. He was trying to appear calm, but his words had already shifted to the defensive. However, it was too late to get defensive now. I had resolved to settle this in one blow, so I intended to put an end to everything with today's confrontation. It's true that an individual report might get buried among others, right? So discussing it would be better for both of us and lead to a smoother resolution. Too bad, but the teacher has agreed to cooperate. The school will contact child services. And child services might contact the police. With the school and child services involved, the chances of the police taking action might increase a bit. Well, it'd be a problem if the police got involved. Then will you agree to the divorce? If so, I won't say anything to child services or the police. How about that? Fine. Worried Stephen might change his mind, I immediately obtained and printed the divorce papers online and had him sign them. After filling out the divorce papers, I didn't want him around Allison anymore, so I kicked him out of the house. With this, Allison would no longer have to shower or sleep with Stephen. Later, Stephen and I divorced, and I got custody of Allison. Normally, I think it would have been difficult for me to get custody of Allison given the circumstances. However, since it was determined that Stephen forcing Allison to shower and sleep with him constituted abuse, he was arrested, allowing me to take her. I heard Stephen complain to me, saying, "This wasn't our deal." But I hadn't broken my promise with Stephen. The reason Stephen ended up getting arrested was because Allison consulted the teacher, the school contacted child services, and child services provided the information to the police. I hadn't done anything. Since it was Allison and the teacher who acted, I don't think it counts as me breaking a promise. However, while Stephen was arrested, he wasn't indicted. At first I was disappointed, but having an arrest record was significant. And the nature of the arrest was sexual abuse of his own child. There was no way he could avoid harsh judgment from society with that kind of label. Stephen's massive loss of credibility made it impossible for him to keep working. So while he wasn't fired, he quickly quit the company himself. Also, given the reason for the divorce, all his relatives cut ties with him. As a result, Stephen was isolated with no one to rely on. After quitting his job, Stephen moved far away, seeking an environment where no one knew him. I don't know what kind of work he's doing, but it seems he is employed. He has to pay child support, so I hope he keeps working hard. I continue to live with Allison. Allison seems brighter than before. Her smiles until now were probably just for show, to avoid being disliked by Stephen and me. I think I had many shortcomings through all of this. So to ensure Allison never has to force a smile again, I'm determined to become a much more reliable mom. The in-laws, who leave all the travel planning to me. Yet, I'm not included in those trips. Words spoken to me by my husband Gail upon his return from an overseas trip were, "Have a nice meal ready when I get back." That was it. Since father-in-law Stephen passed away, Gail has been brainwashed by mother-in-law Veronica and sister-in-law Louise into becoming the main perpetrator of harassment against me. I obediently followed along, preparing delicious meals, waiting for the three of them. I'm Viola, 29 years old. Living with Gail's parents and his unmarried sister Louise, we were a household of 5. Gail works in sales at a pharmaceutical company, and I'm a pharmacist at a university hospital. We met at work. As we got to know each other, Gail asked me out, and we started dating. On our days off, we'd go on trips or play tennis, our shared hobbies. After 2 smooth years of dating, we got married. A year into our marriage, we began living with Gail's family. Initially, I was opposed to living together, wanting to enjoy married life just with Gail. However, the conversation about rebuilding the old family home quickly escalated to making it a two-family house, and before I knew it, we were all living together. Veronica, Louise, and I divided the household chores, as Gail and I both worked. I was mainly in charge of cleaning. Veronica cooked, and Louise did the laundry. We helped each other out when busy. My in-laws and Louise didn't bully me, and living together went unexpectedly well. But Stephen's presence was significant in this harmony. He adored me, Gail's wife, always looking out for me living under his roof. His strong presence as the family head made life comfortable. Everything changed when Stephen suddenly passed away. Stephen, who had been doing well until the day before, passed away, and the family was filled with great sadness. The family, including me who adored kind Stephen like a real father, was engulfed in great sorrow. Losing the head of the house so suddenly, the family's balance crumbled. I thought this was a time for the family to support each other. Veronica, Louise, and even Gail seemed to agree. However, to them, I was an outsider, not family. After Stephen's death, they openly started attacking me.
Viola, the meal isn't ready yet. You really are inefficient. It's ridiculous to divide chores. Housework should be done by the sons. From now on, you'll do it all alone.
That's right.
Why should we have to do household chores? I'm working too, you know? You handle the housework.
So went the unified voices of Veronica and Louise, pushing all the chores onto me. I worked too. I thought, but couldn't talk back, silently taking on all the chores. But working full-time and handling chores for 4 was overwhelming. To this,
the dinner isn't ready yet? You're too inefficient. Make sure you prepare 3 dishes for the meal. These clothes are wrinkled.
They were expensive, so iron them for me, will you? Veronica and Louise said freely. When I sought help from Gail, he said,
just work harder, wife. As Mom says, you're inefficient.
He completely ignored me and even joined in blaming me. All chores were dumped on me, and instead of thanks, I received constant criticism and sarcasm. I was treated like a slave by all 3. It's one thing for Veronica and Louise not to treat me, Gail's wife, as family. But what hurt most was Gail, who chose me as his wife, treating me like an outsider too. In Stephen's absence, I became a mere servant and financial contributor in the eyes of the family I thought I belonged to. On weekdays, I'm busy with work and house chores, and on weekends, I'm chasing after the remaining chores. Amidst this routine, I've been worn down day by day by the inconsiderate words from Veronica, Louise, and Gail. In addition to their harsh words, recently, they've started tripping me while I'm cleaning, or blatantly throwing away my cooking in the sink, complaining it's inedible. All 3 of them have become unbearably rude. And they always say it's because I'm Gail's wife. Just because I'm Gail's wife doesn't mean I deserve to be treated like a slave. As these days continued, about a year later, during a break at work, my boss approached me. Viola, you seem to have lost quite a bit of weight this year, and you always look pale. Is something bothering you? I'm here to listen if you want to talk. Touched by her kind words, I found myself crying as I told her everything. When I finally let out all the verbal and physical abuse from Gail, Veronica, and Louise, my boss comforted me, saying, "You've been bravely facing tough times every day. Actually, I just got divorced recently due to my husband's psychological abuse. I was tired of always walking on eggshells and getting yelled at for the smallest things. The situation you're in is not right. If you want, I can refer you to a good lawyer. Hearing that my admirable and respected boss had gone through something similar was shocking. Her words inspired me to stand up for myself, to sever ties with such people. But simply divorcing Gail and distancing myself from them wasn't enough. I decided to carefully plan my revenge, to make them regret their actions a bit before leaving. However, I couldn't let my actions become a liability in the divorce. I decided to consult the lawyer recommended by my boss, ensuring I had the upper hand in the divorce. Following the lawyer's advice, I began documenting every instance of their verbal and physical abuse. Knowing that these records would be advantageous evidence when I finally left this family made their harassment less damaging. Apparently frustrated by my resilience, their behavior escalated day by day, and I started experiencing more direct violence, like getting hit or pinched for trivial reasons. When I had gathered enough evidence,
"We're going on a family trip,"
suddenly Gail announced. Of course, by family, he meant everyone but me. Back when Stephen was alive, we used to go on trips once or twice a year as a family of 5. But after his death, it became a routine for the 3 of them to travel without me. "Prepare the hotel for our overseas trip," Gail demanded. For some reason, I, who wasn't going, had to arrange their accommodation. When I first heard this, "Why should I do that when I'm not even going?" I protested. Enraged.
"Can't you do even that for your family? I can leave you anytime, you know. Just prepare it without complaining,"
he threatened. After that, I reluctantly arranged their trips just to avoid getting yelled at. Despite my anger at Gail's arrogance, I saw this as an opportunity. "Okay, I'll prepare the hotel," and calmly replied, "I'm going to end everything on this day." That's what I thought as I started preparing for the final stage of the plan. First, to let the 3 of them go on the trip smoothly without suspicion, I arranged a stay at a luxury hotel overseas. When I told them I booked a well-known luxury hotel, Gail said,
"You're surprisingly competent for once,"
in a great mood.
"It's times like these that you need to work hard. Make sure you don't slack off with the housework while we're gone,"
Veronica added. Their arrogant attitude didn't bother me much anymore, as I was progressing with my revenge plan. On the day the 3 of them left for the trip, I saw them off and immediately started my preparations. 2 nights and 3 days would be enough to finish everything. Then, on the morning of the 3rd day, I was woken up by a call from Gail.
"Coming back today, make sure you prepare dinner. Let's see, steak and pizza sound good. Order something delicious. You can just have French fries,"
he ordered arrogantly. Over the phone, Louise also said,
"We've been eating fancy meals at luxury hotels every day, so I'll brag about it when we get back. But before I brag, I want to take a shower, so make sure the shower room is clean."
As usual, acting superior. To proceed with the plan without issues, I replied,
"Understood,"
and hung up the phone. "Remember this," I muttered to myself and decided to check my luggage, which I had almost finished packing yesterday. Then, in the morning, the moving company arrived and started taking out my belongings. Yes, I was leaving this house with my things before the 3 of them returned from their trip. I planned to take everything I bought or brought with me. As I was packing my things, I remembered that most of the furniture and appliances were bought with the money my parents gave us as a housewarming gift. I had all the packed items moved to an apartment I rented near my parents' home. My parents' house is about an hour and a half drive away from this house. After deciding on divorce, I gathered the courage to tell my parents everything. Then, my parents said in unison,
"We can't forgive what our dear daughter has been through.
and were furious, saying, "This is your home, so come back anytime." They gave me those warm words. However, my parents live in a condominium, and my sister has also returned home to receive support during her pregnancy. I had more belongings to take than I expected, and since I could afford to live alone in an apartment with my income, I decided to rent an apartment near my parents' home. After moving all my belongings, the house felt spacious. It made me realize how much furniture and appliances I had been forced to buy, despite it originally being my in-laws' house. Since I'm divorcing and becoming a stranger to those three, there's no reason to leave my things for them. With a clear heart, I began the other preparations. After arranging a colorful meal on the table, I sent a photo to Gail, saying, "Dinner is ready." He replied quickly. Gail quickly responded, "Well, that's passable. The meat looks juicy and delicious. The pizza, what, from a chain store? Well, I'll let it slide this time, especially since you prioritized my favorite steak." That was his message. Even at a time like this, Gail couldn't express gratitude honestly, and I was left speechless. I didn't reply afterward, as I had nothing else to say. By now, he must be showing the dinner photo to Veronica and Louise as well. The food looks very delicious in the photo. A treat for when they return. Muttering that to myself, I laughed mockingly, imagining the three of them shocked and frozen upon their return. Satisfied with my handiwork, I left the house with light steps, heading to my new apartment. I wonder what faces they will make when they return home to find me gone. And most of the furniture and appliances missing. I thought about placing a hidden camera as I started to settle into my new home. I decided to organize some things today and then return to my parents' home. It's not just the furniture and appliances that are missing. I wonder how they will react when they see what I spread out on the table. That's something I'm really curious about. I can easily imagine them turning red with anger. It's a pity I can't see it directly. After organizing my belongings, I returned to my parents' house, where my father, mother, and sister warmly welcomed me. "You really went through a lot. We've prepared all your favorite things today. Go take a shower first." Urged by my mother's voice, I went to take a shower. After taking a shower and checking my mobile phone, I saw dozens of missed calls from Gail and messages from Veronica and Louise. While looking at my phone, another call came in. Of course, it was Gail. When I answered the phone,
Hey, you! Finally answered the phone! What the hell did you do? What do you mean you didn't pay? I didn't know it was cash on delivery. Where are you now? When we got back from the trip, your stuff was gone, and so were the furniture and appliances. What's this on the table? On closer look, they're just samples. You can't eat samples, are you joking?
he yelled. Anticipating Gail's yelling, I held the phone away from my ear. "Did you like my present? Why should I pay for your trip? I'm not your bank." And replied with a sneer. And then,
Where am I? I'm back at my parents' home, where I belong.
I said, interrupting me.
You should prioritize us since you married our son. You think you can just go back to your parents' house and get away with it? You took the appliances and furniture like a thief. Bring them back. And deal with this trash on the table.
Veronica yelled.
I'm becoming a stranger to you, so there's no reason for me to leave my things in a stranger's house. I certainly won't be preparing meals for you. From now on, the three of you should live as a family and support each other. Any further communication should be through my lawyer. I won't respond to direct contact.
By the way, I'll leave you the samples as a keepsake, I said, laughing, while they were still yelling. I ignored the voices of Gail and the others and hung up. Calls and messages continued, but I didn't respond to any. The sample dishes I left on the table instead of real food were made at the food sample factory where my sister works. She's the manager there, so she handled it cleverly. They looked so real in the photos. I knew Veronica and Louise could cook, so it wouldn't be a big deal to them, but remembering their fury over the phone, I felt my little revenge was a great success. More importantly, the damage from the missing TV, washing machine, dresser, vacuum cleaner, and the unpaid hotel bill must be more significant. Most of the household expenses were covered by my salary. Louise contributed only a small allowance. And Gail spent his salary on his hobbies and clothes. Without much savings, buying new furniture and appliances will hurt them. But that's none of my concern now that I'm a stranger to them. The evidence I gathered after consulting my lawyer was perfect. With so much evidence, the lawyer was confident the divorce would be in my favor. I'll leave it to the lawyer to get as much compensation as possible. I might not get much, but being away from those three is the best outcome for me. Negotiations started with the lawyer in between, but Gail was unwilling to accept the divorce. Veronica and Louise, despite the evidence, refused to admit to their abusive behavior, calling it disciplining a son's wife. The discussion was going nowhere, and I was getting frustrated, but the lawyer told the three, "If this doesn't progress and goes to court, it'll become a social credibility issue." Then they reluctantly agreed to talk. They probably underestimated me, thinking I wouldn't seek help from anyone. Even though they knew their abusive behavior would be problematic, they didn't stop. The lack of Stephen's presence made their true colors more evident. Despite the divorce, Gail started showing up at my workplace and parents' house, asking to reconcile.
Viola, I'm truly sorry for everything. I took you for granted while you worked hard at your job and at home. From now on, I will support you, so let's cancel the divorce and stay together.
He said this in front of my workplace, holding a bouquet of flowers, probably just to avoid paying compensation.
I've already asked you to avoid direct contact, right? If you come again, I'll call the police.
As soon as Gail followed me, I went straight to the police station to discuss his stalking and decided to get a restraining order against him. However, undeterred, Gail, Veronica, and Louise somehow found out where my new apartment was and showed up. One day, while relaxing and watching TV, the doorbell suddenly rang. Looking through the peephole, I saw the three of them. I tried to ignore them at first, but they kept ringing the doorbell, causing a disturbance to the other residents, so I reluctantly answered. "Yes," I said.
Viola, have you reconsidered after last time? We really should stay together.
And then Gail started talking cheerfully. Following that, "Viola, we were wrong. We misunderstood that as Gail's wife, you were supposed to work for the family. Let's try to have a good relationship and live well together this time," Veronica added, conveniently arranging her words.
I don't know how you found this place, but I told you to stop direct contact, didn't I? No matter what you say, we are strangers now, and I have no intention of becoming family again,
I replied. Gail's face twisted unhappily.
Don't get so full of yourself just because we've changed our attitude a bit. Come out already.
He raised his voice. It's true that people's fundamental nature doesn't change. As I was thinking this, two men approached them from behind.
We're the feel-good police. You're not allowed to approach someone when there's a restraining order. Please come with us to the station,
they said to Gail. I had contacted the police as soon as the doorbell rang.
You called the police? What are you doing? Explain to them and send them away.
He yelled, but I decided to leave it to the police and turned off the doorbell. Later, Gail, Veronica, and Louise were taken to the police station for questioning and a stern warning. It seems that Veronica, being a housewife with only a small pension, and the salaries of Gail and Louise, were not enough to keep up with the loan and compensation payments, and they ended up selling the house. Now, they are living in a small apartment. As for me, I'm living alone while frequently visiting my parents' home. I'm currently enthralled by my newly born niece. I plan to continue cherishing my family.
Call an ambulance, quick. How can you be so oblivious?
Suddenly, Brittany, who lives next door, rushed into my apartment in a panic. It all started when Tony collapsed in the bathroom. Lately, Tony never parts with his mobile phone, no matter where he is in the house. In fact, he even takes it to the bathroom, apparently talking to someone. Why she, living next door, knew in real time that he had collapsed in the bathroom is beyond me. Honestly, there's no reason for her to call me oblivious. I already know why she is connected to him, and how she knew immediately about his collapse in the bathroom. They might think it's a secret, but there have been many suspicious moments in the past. It's funny they don't realize that they're the only ones who don't notice. I've turned a blind eye until now, but I've decided to put a stop to it. They've been having their way, thinking I've been silently watching. Of course, I plan to retaliate against Tony, but I also want Brittany to suffer just like me. They shouldn't think they can get away with this. It's time for them to pay for 13 years of betrayal. I'm Rosetta, a 40-year-old housewife. I met my husband Tony through a mutual acquaintance. At my age, I long to marry and build a warm home. A friend suggested I meet Tony, saying it wouldn't hurt just to meet. I was all work and no play, with no chances to meet anyone. Watching my friends get married, I wondered what life with someone I loved would be like. Thinking it was just a meeting, I said yes, only to find an unexpectedly great connection. Our hobbies and topics of conversation matched, and our conversational pace and rhythm felt incredibly comfortable. It was as if we had met before, and I wanted to see him again. I had dated a few men before, but none with whom I could talk so freely. My first impression of Tony was of a caring man, always putting me first. I quickly fell for his ever-present kindness.
Rosetta, I thought this would suit you. What's this? It's not my birthday or our anniversary. Can I open it?
Please do. Inside the box he handed me was a beautiful lemon yellow dress.
It's lovely. I've never worn a dress like this. I wonder if it suits me. It's definitely going to suit you, Rosetta. I want to see you in it here.
Here? I'm a bit nervous. I quickly tried on the dress.
Yeah. The size is just right. It suits you as I thought. I'm happy. Thank you.
He nodded with satisfaction as he looked at me. Though kind to me, I sometimes caught a glimpse of his stern side. It was mostly during work-related calls. Even on dates, he'd occasionally receive calls and issue instructions. I'd find myself admiring his commanding presence. He, a manager, seemed to be always busy, even on his days off. It must be tough getting work calls even on your day off. Well, it's not too bad. But it can be tough dealing with incompetent subordinates. Oh, we should head out. Our restaurant reservation is coming up. Laughing, we hand in hand, hurried to the restaurant we had reserved. I wanted to marry a wonderful woman like you. Will you marry me? If it's with you, I'd be happy to. Please take care of me from now on. I felt happy to be able to marry him. But this happiness, I soon realized, was fleeting. I intended to continue working as a nurse even after getting married. But things seemed to be heading in a bad direction. About the housework. I plan to continue working, even though we're married. Is it okay to ask you to help when I have night shifts? His expression then turned grim. You intend to continue working? Yes, is that a problem? It's a bit, not right for a woman to keep working after marriage. Nowadays, it's not uncommon for couples to be dual income. In reality, there are more households around me where both partners are working hard as dual income couples than those with just a housewife. Even after hearing my reasoning, he insisted I should quit working after marriage, so I asked him why. I thought there must be some reason from his perspective. Believing it's important for spouses to understand and compromise with each other, I decided to ask. Ever since college days, I've been coming back to a dark room and turning on the light alone. Tony, you've lived alone for a long time since college, right? The moment the room lights up and I realize I'm alone, I just hate that feeling. His expression seemed to darken for a moment. So that's how you felt. I lived with my family for a long time, but I guess living alone can make you feel that way. That's why I want you, Rosetta, to quit your full-time job. Of course, I'll work in your place. There's even talk of me becoming a director soon. Really? A promotion at this time? That's amazing. Then, scratching the tip of his nose awkwardly, he replied. Whenever he feels shy about something, he fiddles with his nose and breathes heavily. He looked at me as if expecting more praise, so he must have been really happy. He always prioritized career advancement, working hard to be recognized at work, so this honor must mean a lot to him. It's not a big deal for someone like me. But there are only a few among my peers who have become managers, so I guess my progress is relatively fast. Proudly saying this, I felt a hesitation beside him. Sensing my indecision, he leaned in and said, "You're not going to cling to your job when I, your husband, am asking you this humbly, right?" I was speechless at his expression, one I had never seen before. It was unbelievable, and instinctively, I felt I shouldn't meet his eyes anymore, a strange sensation. Being told this, I felt I had no choice but to quit. I wanted to continue a bit longer, but I decided to resign, considering it was my beloved husband's request. Life as a housewife, starting with our marriage, was harder than I expected. I thought being a housewife meant doing household chores, but it was extremely busy. Taking advantage of me being a housewife, Tony stopped doing any housework. Women's workplace is like the home, right? It's wrong to just rush through work to have your own free time. I couldn't talk back to him when he said this in a stern tone. In the morning, I prepared breakfast and helped him get ready for work, timing it with when he woke up. Until he returned at night, I finished all chores like preparing dinner and cleaning the bathroom. "Tony, breakfast's ready." "I'll be right there." He sat down at the table, looking around leisurely and sighed deeply. "You know I went out for a work-related drink last night, right?" "Yes, I thought so since you came back late." "What about it?" "If I went out for drinks, shouldn't the breakfast be Eggs Benedict?" "I'm sorry, I didn't consider that." Then he, tapping his finger on the table, silently glared at me. He was particular and would strongly point out anything that differed even slightly from his preferences. "Hey, is this where the vase was supposed to be?" A normal vase placed beside the TV stand. I bought it thinking it would add a nice touch to the home since he likes flowers. I haven't decided exactly where to place the vase, but I wonder if something went wrong. The vase? I moved it a bit since it was blocking the TV view. Tony clicked his tongue and glared at me. "With this angle, it blocks the view of the painting from my seat. A masterpiece obscured by flowers, what were you thinking? So selfish to prioritize watching TV." "I didn't mean to. I'm sorry." Try to understand the feelings of a man who's dealing with such a selfish woman. He kept blaming me relentlessly. Hearing how inadequate I was, I started to strongly believe I was a terrible person. "Rosetta, you've always lived at home and only worked as a nurse, so you might not understand, but society isn't so kind, you know? Being limited to the medical world like that." When he said this, I started to feel anxious, wondering if my narrow perspective was causing him discomfort. "You say you're a doctor or nurse, but in the end, you only know a narrow world, don't you?" "Yes, I suppose." "I've been working at the same company for 30 years since graduating from college, so I'm good at sensing these things." I'll teach you, so be sure to pay attention. Honestly, I felt that continuing as a nurse would have been far better. His relentless sarcasm often lasts for 2 to 3 hours. Showing any sign of displeasure means starting all over again with the lectures, so I'm not even allowed to look upset. I focused solely on giving answers that would satisfy him or nodding as if I were listening. While it's possible to ignore Tony's sarcasm, there's another issue that's been bothering me for a while. Brittany, our next-door neighbor. She seems to be a successful influencer, and her voice can be heard every night during her broadcasts. Despite living in a well-insulated condominium, the sound leaks through, indicating she must be playing at a very high volume. I've been troubled by this noise since moving in 13 years ago and have complained 2 or 3 times. Remembering those times still makes me angry. Since those complaints, it seems I've been marked as an enemy in her eyes. Every time we pass each other, she clicks her tongue at me. Although it's a regular occurrence, it's still unpleasant to experience every night. Don't you know what kind of person the neighbor is? He looked at me sharply when I asked. Is there a problem with the neighbor? I hope it's not trouble with them. No, it's not trouble, but the noise. I was wondering if there's something we could do about it. I don't think it's a big deal. Just don't confront the neighbor directly, okay? Saying that, he ended the conversation and drank his beer. I haven't brought it up since. Tony often comes home late at night due to his busy work schedule. I try to wait up for him, but sometimes I fall asleep. One night, I thought I heard Tony's voice and tried to get up, thinking he was home, but I was too sleepy. I needed to get up quickly to avoid making him angry. However, when I got up, I couldn't see him anywhere. Huh? Didn't he come home? I could hear Tony's voice, but where was it coming from? Listening closely. It seemed to be coming from next door. It also sounded like he was talking to someone, but was he talking to Brittany? Why would his voice be coming from Brittany's apartment at 1 a.m.? Feeling uneasy, I decided to use some savings I had hidden away from my working days to hire a detective. I never thought I'd be the one to hire a detective. What the detective found was unexpected. However, I still felt it wasn't the right time to confront Tony with this evidence. As the year-end approached, I had a bad feeling. With the long holiday break around the corner and the unpredictability of what might happen on the last day of work before then, I felt a bit heavy. That year-end, Tony came home a bit early from his last day of work before the long holiday, seemingly in a good mood. He had been drinking and was more relaxed than usual. Lately, he'd been irritable and taking it out on me, so this was a bit of a relief. Welcome home, Tony. You're home early today. Yeah, it's the day before the break, so I had a few drinks with colleagues. I see. Must have been tiring. Looking at the fridge, he asked for more alcohol. Hey, I'm not done drinking. Get me something. It was a good thing that he was in a good mood, but his face was clearly flushed from drinking too much. Your face is all red. Haven't you drunk a bit much? Drunk too much? Are you saying I can't hold my liquor? Alcohol is essential for office workers. I'm not weak to it. Saying that, he quickly drank the beer he was holding. He doesn't particularly like beer. He used to boast about how well he could drink, but I've had to pick him up from bars countless times. Despite his grand claims about being a corporate drinker, I always end up taking care of him when he's drunk. Man, I've sweated a lot drinking tonight. I'll take a quick shower before bed. Saying this, he took his mobile phone to the bathroom. He never used to bring his mobile phone to the bathroom, but lately, he doesn't let it out of his sight, even there. He even takes it with him to the bathroom, which makes me wonder if there's something he desperately doesn't want seen. Thinking about this, I decided to keep an eye on the situation. From the bathroom where he went, I could hear him talking on the phone. The conversation was too quiet to make out, but I wondered what could be so important to discuss in the bathroom. Then, a loud noise came from the bathroom. Shocked, I rushed there and found Tony, looking pained, curled up in the bathtub. Just as he regained consciousness and tried to get out, he collapsed again, unconscious. I quickly checked his condition. At that moment, someone was furiously banging on the door. The banging was so intense, I thought the door might break. It's a rental, and having someone break the door isn't exactly a laughing matter. And who could it be at such a critical time? Yes, I'm a bit busy right now. When I opened the door, it was Brittany.
Move. Get out of the way.
I couldn't comprehend why she would show up right now. She pushed past me, making a beeline for the bathroom without any hesitation.
Wait! What are you doing? Tony, what's wrong? Tony!
Ignoring my astonishment, she took charge of the situation. She acted as if she were the wife, which was bizarre.
Call an ambulance, quick! How can you be so oblivious?
I couldn't let her continue her reckless behavior. There was only one thing to do. Confront her with reality. I just stood there, looking down on them.
Call an ambulance? And you think you have the right to order me around? What do you mean?
Just what I said. Do you think you, of all people, have the right to give orders to me, his wife? She seemed taken aback by my retort. As if it was unthinkable for me to talk back.
If you're so concerned, why don't you call the ambulance? No, I can't, that's why I'm asking you. Think a little, will you?
Suddenly she got angry and objected. I guess so. She snapped back angrily, obviously because it would be embarrassing for her as the mistress to have stormed into the house in a panic. She's probably afraid of a call revealing the affair. She's flustered to make a call, just staring at Tony lying there. I couldn't help but laugh.
You can't even make a phone call? That's just pathetic.
My words seemed to anger her.
What do you mean, pathetic? Are you mocking our pure love?
Her belief in their pure love, despite being just an affair, was terrifying. Focused solely on themselves, their blindness was almost enviable, but this wasn't the time for that.
If you're really concerned about him, making a call should be easy. You should be able to do it.
I challenged her to make the call, showing her the phone. If she really could, there should be no problem. Furious, she glared at me, her face red with anger. Tony seemed to regain consciousness from our voices. He was unconscious, and even when he woke up, he still seemed to be in a lot of pain. He was still in pain, struggling to speak.
My head hurts like it's splitting. Call an ambulance.
He looked extremely pained, his usual composed expression gone. I remarked.
It must be hard. We really should call an ambulance, shouldn't we? What are you waiting for? Do it now.
Right. Something needs to be done quickly. Ignoring his words, I decided to take action. Leaving him rolling in agony, I silently left the house. I took the waterproof-packed mobile phone that had fallen in the bathroom, so he couldn't call from his phone. Brittany and Tony, now awake, seemed relieved and were leisurely affirming their love for each other. Blind to everything but themselves, they didn't even notice I took the phone. I couldn't deal with this foolish, cheating couple any longer. Seizing the opportunity, I decided to leave the house. I immediately left the house and contacted Brittany's boyfriend, Robert. Robert is Brittany's boyfriend, with whom she has a relationship serious enough to consider marriage. He stays over about half the week, so they're practically cohabitating. I've run into him a few times in the hallway and at the garbage disposal area. He's a doctor working at a nearby hospital. I remembered receiving his business card before.
Good evening. Sorry for calling so late. It seems Brittany is at my place for some reason. Could you come and pick her up?
Is this Rosetta? Long time no see.
You're saying Brittany is at your place? What do you mean by that?
His voice over the phone sounded confused. Understandably so. Anyone would be surprised by a sudden night call from their girlfriend's neighbor.
I'll explain the details later. Are you at work right now?
No, I've just finished work and am killing time at a restaurant near the workplace. Brittany said she had a stream tonight and asked me to come back late. So, Brittany had been making sure not to let Robert stay at her place. She was casually talking to Tony over the phone while Robert was away.
Can you come as soon as possible?
I'll head over right away. Let's meet at the condominium entrance.
Thank you. I'll join you there.
3 minutes after the call, he arrived at the condo's entrance, and we went to my apartment together. On the way, I briefly explained the situation.
To put it bluntly, it seems Brittany and my husband Tony have been having an affair for many years.
What? What do you mean?
I found out through investigation. They met in a service store 13 years ago and have been involved ever since.
Robert was visibly shocked by my words.
13 years?
Since that long ago?
Yes. She moved into the apartment next to ours by chance 2 years ago.
No way. Then what am I? I thought we were going to get married. He was struggling to come to terms with the reality of being cheated on. It would be so understandable, considering his marriage plans.
It seems to be for money. I suspected my husband's infidelity and hired a detective. The investigation results indicated that.
That's unbelievable.
Brittany rushed into our apartment when Tony collapsed in the bath. Apparently, they were talking on the phone even in the bathroom.
He seemed deep in thought but then looked at me.
That explains it. No wonder she never lets go of her phone. But you said Tony collapsed. Is he all right? He's fine, just drank too much. No danger to his life.
After explaining briefly, I led him to my apartment. Entering quietly, they were still engrossed in their melodramatic scene.
I'll fight against the world for you, Tony.
Having such a beautiful woman love me, I'm blessed. This must be a trial from God to reach true love. In the 10 minutes it took me to leave, contact Robert. Within the short time, an epic story seemed to have unfolded. A tragic tale of lovers who can't swear eternal love to each other. I was surprised Tony could spout such cheesy lines. Glancing at Robert beside me, he looked indescribable. Seemingly shaking from the cringeworthy dialogue. Unable to bear it any longer, Robert dropped his bag, alerting them to our presence.
What's going on here? Robert, why are you here?
Strangely, both were naked, which was comical.
Why? That should be my line. You told me not to come home early because of a stream. Was it for this?
Normally mild-mannered Robert raised his voice, and Brittany seemed a bit taken aback.
Well, that's because, you know, the fans and antis are troublesome. I was worried about what would happen if they found out I have a boyfriend.
Brittany looked evasive. I knew Robert only from brief exchanges in the apartment complex. He never seemed like someone who would raise his voice. Indeed, he listened calmly when I explained everything to him earlier, showing his ability to control his emotions. So, for Robert to react this strongly, she must have really crossed a line.
Stop taking people for fools. To think you've been secretly having an affair with the neighbor for 13 years.
She suddenly became defensive, her eyes darting around. I thought maybe I'd marry Robert. Is that bad? She tried to look innocent and appealing, but it only backfired with Robert.
We were cohabitating because we talked about marriage someday, but now I just can't believe you.
Brittany, realizing Robert was genuinely angry, quickly switched tactics.
No, this is a misunderstanding. I was just teaching him about streaming, like personal training for the digital age.
Brittany seemed to think we knew nothing about influencers or video streaming, and was clearly trying to bluff her way through. Despite her desperate attempts to wriggle out of the situation, Robert wasn't having any of it.
Private lessons, is that it? Have you already forgotten what you yourself said earlier?
I played the cheesy dialogue I had secretly recorded at high volume.
Hey! You recorded this without me knowing? That's a violation of privacy. Delete it now.
Privacy? You have no right to talk about privacy.
I'm filing for divorce.
Tony, clearly not expecting me to initiate a divorce, was panicking.
Divorce? How are you going to live without me? You're living off me, and now you're talking about divorce? Have you lost your mind?
He seemed to think I would break down and beg him. His male superiority mindset was apparent, still in disbelief over the current situation. His absolute confidence baffled me, but it didn't matter anymore.
Say whatever you want. You can only act tough for so long.
Eventually, we got divorced. After the incident, I immediately sought a lawyer who is an expert in divorce and infidelity cases. Presenting the evidence video helped me demand more than the usual alimony. Meanwhile, Brittany's engagement with Robert was called off, and she now lives a secluded life. This is partly because her streaming blew up after the affair scandal. Right after the infidelity news broke, fans analyzed Brittany's posts, exposing her relationship with Tony. The fans' sharp eyes discerned details from subtle reflections and background elements in her posts. The posts and their hints led to the discovery of her affair with him. The scandal affected Tony too. His company received numerous calls, forcing them to acknowledge the situation. He was fired, for his company took the situation seriously. The company must have wanted to get rid of the trouble. I guess so. After all, a high-profile influencer's affair with a married corporate employee from major enterprise was criticized heavily. When the company's stock dipped around the time of the scandal, they couldn't ignore it any longer. Now, he struggles with the public's disdain and rarely goes out, a consequence of his own actions. He's often the subject of online posts, making it risky for him to venture outside. I ran into Brittany once after the turmoil. She appeared as if waiting for me while I shopped at a grocery store near my workplace.
How come you're living comfortably off a big settlement while I suffer? Isn't that unfair?
Her audacity was typical.
There's nothing unfair about it. It's all the result of your actions. I have nothing to say to you. And what's with your high and mighty attitude? Because of you, my engagement was broken off.
She approached me, growing more agitated.
I was so close to marrying a doctor. Just stop it, will you? You've been secretly having an affair while engaged, and yet you're playing the victim. I can't understand your logic. You should mind your behavior. What do you know? You're the one who's the talk of the internet now. If someone sees this, it'll end up online again.
Realizing the risk, Brittany quickly covered herself with her hood and left in a hurry. Since separating from Tony, I've been enjoying my single life. Living at my own pace is wonderful. I've returned to my nursing job, surprisingly recalling much of my previous knowledge. Surprisingly, my body seems to remember, and I am able to do a certain amount of things. Though I once doubted my future, I now live a fulfilling life, forgetting Tony and Brittany as my form of revenge.
Vivian's room looks different. Did you just realize that? Aren't you a bit slow? Or perhaps you're getting dementia. Please, don't be a nuisance to us.
Rocky and his wife, Ava, laughed as they saw me standing frozen in front of my own room. These people are devils. They're trying to drive me out of the house. I had a bad feeling about this since I arrived, and it turned out to be true. Ava's words made Rocky laugh with a sneer as well. However, they seem to be under one misunderstanding. They think the mortgage on this house is already paid off. If so, I must use this to my advantage. The disdain they show me will only last for now.
Are you really okay with this? Even if I'm gone? Of course. Did you think you were needed?
Their laughter will only last for now. My name is Florence, 54 years old. I gave birth twice in my early 20s and have gone through a divorce. I raised 2 sons as a single mother. My eldest son's name is Rocky, 30 years old. He's married with children. My granddaughter is truly adorable. Her name is Vivian. She just turned 3 and will enter preschool next year. Since my younger son, Joseph, has also left, I've decided to live freely and went ahead to buy a house. I finished raising my children relatively early, so I've been working hard. That's why I had some savings. However, due to a long period of being poor, I've gotten into the habit of saving. My sons didn't seem to know I had money when I bought the house, and both were surprised. I won't be a bother to you too. I can take care of myself. To this, Rocky said to me,
Mom, I have my own family now and can't take care of you. You need to act your age and not be a bother, okay?
Are these the words of a son I struggled to raise? More than sadness, I felt irritation at this moment. I won't be a bother. After all, I'm still young.
Young. Well, I won't get involved, just so you know.
Yes. Probably, Rocky is preemptively saying he won't take care of me if I get dementia or become ill. I vowed to keep my body and mind healthy. I don't want to be taken care of by someone who says such things. Rocky has always had a not-so-great personality. Joseph is the silent type who doesn't say much. Harmless, but I've had my worries, and perhaps I paid too much attention to Joseph, making Rocky the type to cause trouble. It was cute when they were kids, but it's pathetic for an adult to keep saying unnecessary things. I wonder how he even got married. When he first said he wanted to marry someone, I almost cried. I was happy that someone would marry such a son. The first time Rocky brought home the woman who would become his wife. Nice to meet you. My name is Ava. Ava was already looking around the house before greeting. At that time, we were living in a small apartment. It was quite old but well maintained, and I thought it was fine, but Ava's impression was different.
Really, just as you said, an old house.
I couldn't believe my ears. To say such a thing when becoming part of the family was shocking. However, Rocky, without reprimanding her, just laughed.
That's why I said, let's greet quickly and go back. Wait a minute. I've prepared a meal. No way. We can't eat in such a dirty place. We came here because you wanted to at least say hello. We're not staying for a meal.
Saying this, they left. I cried eating the leftover meal alone. It felt so empty and frustrated. I couldn't understand how someone could behave like that towards me at the first meeting. I only felt anger towards Rocky for not stopping her behavior. After the wedding, Rocky and Ava completely disappeared. They must be enjoying their life, I thought. I didn't want to meet Ava after our first impression, so it was a relief. One day, I received a message that they had a child. This was truly a joy. My first grandchild. I went to the hospital immediately and was happy when I held her. It was only for a short time, but it was a happy moment. Grandchildren are special, as they say, and she truly was. Her name seems to be Vivian.
Vivian.
When I called her name, she seemed to react a little.
I must live long enough to see Vivian grow up properly.
I remember making that resolution in my heart. But it wasn't easy to get to see her. I should have been prepared for it, but the reality of not being allowed to see her was sad. Hearing that Ava's parents were meeting her made it even more shocking. Perhaps it's true that the parents on the woman's side are more likely to see their grandchildren. No, it's just that my relationship with my eldest son is particularly weak. But I wanted to see her at least once a year. With that slight hope, I made a call.
Please don't come today because we're going out. Then, when can I see you? It's been a year already. You don't need to see her, right? Ava's mom is enough to be Vivian's grandmother. How can you say that?
That was the first time I truly felt alone. Fortunately, I was working, so I could talk to my colleagues about it. Everyone sympathized, saying it was too harsh, and I felt rescued. One colleague advised me, now that I was alone, to forget about such a family and do things I had been holding back on. That might be a good idea. First, I wondered what to do and spent my days fretting alone at home. Then, I saw a feature on TV about someone who moved to a place rich in nature and started living a refreshed life. I decided that was it for me, switched to fully remote work, and bought a house in the suburbs. I informed my sons about it. Then, Ava showed interest and came over with Vivian. I was delighted with Vivian's unexpected visit. Changing my environment had immediately led to something good.
This place would be good for Vivian's environment too.
I felt a sense of discomfort as she said that while looking around the house. Since then, Ava started coming over frequently, asking me to look after Vivian. Florence, you're happy to see Vivian, aren't you?
Yes, but isn't it too frequent? You were so eager to see Vivian. I'm fulfilling your wish, and now you're complaining?
Rocky and Ava spoke as if leaving their child with me was for my sake. Babysitting a few times a week turned into every day. I had hoped to enjoy my alone time, but this made it impossible. I was getting sleep-deprived, balancing work and babysitting.
Florence, Vivian is here today too. Ava, I think I told you yesterday, but I'm a bit sick. Oh, I have plans to meet with friends today. It's too late now. Sorry, but you'll have to take Vivian with you. It's okay, your friends will understand. How irresponsible of you to say that.
I wanted to tell them how irresponsible it was to dump babysitting on me every day, but I was too sick to argue. In the end, Ava left for her outing and didn't come back until 10 p.m. Vivian was at an age where she wouldn't listen to me. It was really tough. That day, they came to pick her up just before 10 a.m. Taking advantage of my silence, late-night pickups became frequent. Sometimes, they even left Vivian to stay overnight.
Please, Rocky, talk to Ava. Huh? No way. After all, you seemed happy about it. I can't handle babysitting every day. I have work, you know? How selfish. You asked for this.
When did I ever wish for daily babysitting? It's a mystery. After that conversation, an incident occurred. Suddenly one morning, a moving company brought a ton of stuff.
What's going on? I didn't hear anything about moving. We were worried about you and thought about living together with Vivian, so we decided to move.
Rocky's family had decided to move in. And what audacity in their words. I firmly refused to live together, but I didn't want to trouble the movers, so we agreed to talk after the move.
It's impossible for 4 people to live here. It's fine. It's spacious enough. Besides, I like it here.
Ava sat back on the sofa as if it was her own house and said that to me. Vivian was caught between me and Ava, looking at us. So, I couldn't say anything more. I had dreamt of a free-spirited life alone, but now I was starting to live with Rocky's family. Despite being a housewife, Ava did no household chores.
I'm busy with childcare,
she said, making me prepare 3 meals a day. Of course, they didn't give me any money for groceries. If this continues, I'll just be doing whatever they say. Since being at home meant I'd be left with the babysitting duties, I started leaving the house early in the morning to go to work. Even though I had switched to remote work, I was commuting.
Florence, weren't you supposed to be fully remote? Sorry, I'm just really busy right now.
It was true that I was busy with work. I had been chosen to lead a new department that was being created. After a long day of overtime, coming home past 11 p.m., something seemed off about the room. I was too tired to think much of it and headed straight to my room.
What? This is...
Nothing of mine was left in my room, which was now overflowing with Vivian's things. Vivian was sleeping peacefully on the bed.
It's turned into Vivian's room.
Standing dumbfounded at the entrance, I heard laughter. Turning around, Ava and Rocky were standing side by side, smirking at me. I couldn't grasp the situation. Where are my things?
We got rid of them.
They had kept only the furniture and appliances they liked. Almost everything of mine was thrown away. Really? They hardly brought in any money. We tried selling them at a recycle shop, but were told they were in bad condition. It was embarrassing.
The little money we got from it, we'll keep.
That's when I realized. These two had been planning to drive me out of this house from the beginning.
You're out early in the morning and come back late. You don't need a house, do you? You're trying to kick me out? Did you just realize? Aren't you a bit slow? Or perhaps you're getting dementia. Please, don't be a nuisance to us.
This woman is a devil. How could someone do something so cruel? It's unimaginable. I gave up on staying and fighting with Ava and her cohort.
So, I should take this as you're kicking me out?
Yes. We'll be living here. Think of it as your last act of filial piety and leave. I hadn't received any filial piety. Why should I be the one to perform it? But I kept silent.
Are you really okay with this? Even if I'm gone? Florence, did you think we needed you? The most you were useful for was babysitting.
The next day, I left the house as if I was being driven out. I hesitated about going to Joseph's house, but considering his reserved nature and the possibility of him cohabiting with someone, it would be unfair to burden him. Reluctantly, I decided to stay in a business hotel near my workplace. That night, Ava and Rocky apparently celebrated driving me out. Florence, you're not thinking of doing anything strange, are you?
Don't worry, she's thick-skinned.
Alone in the business hotel, I pondered over my situation. The next day, I explained my circumstances to my company and took some time off. I was worried about causing trouble for my team, but my colleagues were very supportive, which comforted me.
The house, can you transfer it into my name?
Rocky called me with such a request right away. I was actually about to contact you about that. You're sure you want to transfer it?
Don't make me say it over and over. We talked about this when you left, didn't we? Hurry up. Understood.
I proceeded with the transfer as requested. A few days later, as expected, I received a call.
Florence, what is this about? Are you talking about the loan? You tricked us. Let's meet and talk this over.
Tricked them? They were the ones who drove me out. Knowing a confrontation was inevitable, I headed to Ava and Rocky's place. Vivian was left with Ava's parents. They were clearly ready for a fight. Florence, who is this person?
A lawyer.
I had brought a lawyer in case anything happened. Ava and Rocky were clearly surprised. Having a lawyer meant they couldn't manipulate the situation as they might have wanted. Their dismay was evident.
A lawyer? Why would you bring someone like that? Because you might make up some false accusations. It's better for both of us to have a third party present. Don't bring outsiders into this. If that's your attitude, then there's no point in talking. I'm leaving.
As I was about to leave, Ava nudged Rocky. Reluctantly, Rocky stopped me, and the discussion began with the lawyer present.
We didn't know there was still a loan to pay.
You drove me out, and now you're saying you didn't know.
Why are you laughing?
Ava stood up angrily. Rocky stopped her and pointed to a voice recorder on the table. Ava sat down again but glared at me the entire time. It was clear from her expression that she was furious.
The monthly payment for this house's mortgage is $1,800. Good luck paying it together. $1,800. Mom, how do you have so much money? After you two became adults, I started working more, cut down on living expenses, and began investing.
I never wanted my sons to feel poor just because they had a single mother. So, I endured personal hardships to ensure they didn't feel deprived, allowing them to do what they wanted within our means, even if we couldn't afford luxuries. That's why I honestly didn't have much savings. Then, a coworker advised me on the importance of saving for the future. Luckily, I was only 43 when I sent my sons off to college. I could work a lot. So, I started a side job, worked double, and increased my income. Once I had saved a bit, I invested it. After 10 years, I had accumulated a significant amount. After my sons were independent, I decided to use the money I earned for myself and boldly took out a mortgage to buy a house, only to have it taken from me.
Now that I've already transferred the ownership, you two will be responsible for the remaining mortgage payments. Since you took it upon yourselves to take over, it's your responsibility. That's not logical.
Ava's face turned red with rage. Then, the lawyer explained that I had no obligation to pay, and that disposing of someone's property could be a crime. He also mentioned that if they insisted on making me pay for a mortgage I wasn't living under, they could face legal action for that too. Rocky and Ava, not well versed in the law, started to panic. Clearly, they didn't want to go to court.
We understand. We'll figure out the mortgage on our own.
Please don't sue us.
Good, as long as you understand.
Ava grimaced in frustration.
By doing this, you're no longer a mother or anything to us. Don't ever show your face to us again.
Rocky hurled those words at me in a rage. Since moving out, I hadn't seen much of my son anyway. After all the unpleasantness and being driven out, I had no feelings left for Rocky. Feeling relieved at the thought of not having to see their faces again, I said,
I have no desire to see you again either, so this works out for me.
Rocky looked surprised when I said that, probably thinking I would never abandon him.
This wasn't supposed to happen.
I heard Rocky's voice as I left through the front door. Months later, Ava called to apologize. Florence, I'm so sorry. Please come back. We can't possibly afford the payments.
Even if you apologize, I'm not coming back. I've moved to a new house.
Where is it? Can I come now? I couldn't help but laugh. What is this woman so desperate for?
Ava, do you really think I'd tell you where I am?
Please. We're going to be bankrupt at this rate. That's not my problem. Besides, Ava could just work. It's wrong to rely on someone else without working yourself.
You could work.
I have started working. But then Rocky got fired.
What? Why?
That surprised me. According to Ava, Rocky had been working late for overtime pay. One day, he stole money from a coworker's wallet while they were in the bathroom. Please don't report me to the police. Rocky had begged his coworker. Even though it was just $50, the coworker didn't file a police report, but did report it to their boss, resulting in Rocky's dismissal. Ava was furious that Rocky had jeopardized their future.
What are you doing for just $50? Just work yourself. I am part-time. Get a full-time job. I have a child. Part-time work is more flexible.
They apparently argue like this almost daily. With Rocky unemployed, the mortgage payments weren't waiting. I'm terrified of the payment due dates. I feel like I'm losing my mind.
And you think it's okay to ask for help from someone you kicked out? You told me never to show my face again. So, I can't help you.
That was just something Rocky said in the heat of the moment.
Words said in haste can have irreversible consequences.
Ava fell silent. She seemed to be crying. She sounded truly desperate. But I have no obligation to help. I can become a devil too. Sorry, but please don't contact me again. If you do, I'll block your number. I said that and unilaterally ended the call. It was right after that. As I was leaving the office for lunch with my colleagues, Ava, Rocky, and Vivian were standing there. My colleagues quickly noticed and showed their concern for me. Go ahead without me. I told my colleagues and approached the three of them. What do you want? I was surprised at how cold my own voice sounded. Then Rocky began to apologize deeply.
Stop this, not here.
I took the three of them to a nearby bench. I didn't want Vivian to see her father apologizing so deeply to her grandmother. I was wrong. Please, help us.
One thing, didn't you say never to show up again?
That was. Rocky's ears turned red, likely from the shame of his actions. And damaging his own pride.
No need to apologize anymore. Just don't ever appear in front of me again.
Am I not your son anymore?
I don't consider you my son anymore. That's too harsh. Florence, that's really harsh.
Do you have the right to judge me? Ava fell silent. After being ridiculed, treated as a nuisance, used, and driven out by my own son, I couldn't think of him as my son anymore. I realized they didn't understand how much they had hurt me. Explaining it to them would be pointless. They wouldn't recognize the abnormality of their actions. It's better to let them face the consequences of their actions.
You're still Vivian's grandmother, right?
I expected this kind of turn when they brought Vivian. Vivian is innocent. But if being involved meant being used like this, I decided to give up on Vivian. Using Vivian won't work.
I won't extend my hand to you again, nor will I meet you. I plan to live in a different world now. But you said you wanted to see Vivian. Don't use Vivian. Solve your own problems. You brought this on yourselves. Are you okay being alone?
That must have been Rocky's last attempt. But I'm not alone anymore. I noticed my colleagues had come back and were standing behind me.
If I didn't have them, I couldn't have done anything about this situation. I'm not alone, so I'm strong.
Let's stop this. Rocky. I'm embarrassed. Rocky hung his head weakly. Ava, pulling Vivian's hand, left Rocky behind and walked away.
Well, our lunch break is almost over, so we're going. Goodbye.
Leaving Rocky behind, I left with my colleagues. Rocky seemed to stand there in a daze for a while, but was eventually escorted off the premises by security. Eventually, Rocky and Ava couldn't make the mortgage payments and fell behind. Ignoring the demand letters led to the financial institution demanding immediate full repayment. Panicked, Rocky and Ava consulted with the financial institution. The house was put up for auction. Due to its location, it didn't sell for the desired price. Maybe because I had customized it to my liking, which might have limited its appeal. Desperate to sell, Ava lowered the price on her own. It sold for about half of what it was purchased for. This left them with a substantial debt to pay off.
What have you done? You did this without consulting me. I thought it was better to sell it quickly. Why do you always act without thinking? This is why I can't stand people who haven't worked in society. What? I'm taking care of the child. If you helped a bit, I could work too.
Eventually, they were left with a large debt and no home. Their credit cards stopped working, and they couldn't get new ones. Unable to rent a house, they temporarily stayed with Ava's parents, who kicked them out because Ava didn't contribute to the household or work, using childcare as an excuse. Somehow, Ava's father managed to get them an old apartment, but a tough life awaited them. Ava's family refused to help any further. Ava's father even said not to come back until they had paid off their debts. Vivian ended up being taken care of at Ava's parents' house. I was worried about Vivian, so hearing that brought me relief. With Vivian gone and needing to work, Ava looked for jobs but couldn't find anything. So she ended up cleaning bathrooms at a shopping mall. There, she accidentally ran into a friend from her school days and was laughed at, leading to a humiliating experience. Ava came home crying, and Rocky's cold attitude only added to her stress. Rocky and Ava fought almost every day, often getting scolded by their neighbors because of the noise. Both of them actually wanted a divorce, but Rocky couldn't afford to lose his home, and Ava couldn't handle the debt repayment on her own. When they looked into divorce once, they found an article saying debts could be divided, which made them give up on the idea. Ava had no one to consult with, so she relied on internet articles. These messages were left on my mobile phone's voicemail. After they contacted me again, I decided to block their numbers. Rocky and Ava are still burdened with a huge debt, working every day for repayment. They must regret taking over my house, but it's too late for regrets now. As for me, after staying in a hotel for a few days, I received a call from Joseph out of the blue. He had moved and was calling to give me his new address. When I told him about what had happened for the first time, he was very upset that I hadn't consulted him and invited me to stay at his place. What surprised me was how spacious it was. I knew Joseph had started a business, but I wasn't aware of the details. The company had grown enough to afford a house without me realizing. Now, I'm enjoying my time living with Joseph. He's about to get married, so I'll have to move out. But he surprised me by gifting me a house next to his. He apologized for it being a small house. But I loved the design, it was exactly to my taste. I never knew you understood me so well. I was moved because I thought the reticent Joseph wasn't interested in me. A few days later, I met his fiancée, who was wonderful. She welcomed me living next door. They also welcomed me to live next door. Actually, it was her idea to build the house next to theirs. I'm looking forward to my new home and the new family next door. Even though I lost Rocky, experiencing Joseph's kindness has made me happy. My name is Monica. Whenever I see a beautiful woman of my age, I think to myself, I've got to work on my skincare, or maybe lose some weight. But, before I know it, I'm saying I'll start tomorrow every day, and now I'm 42. Lately, even using a toner feels like a chore, so my skin is protected by a natural oil veil of my own making.
Hey Siri!
Tell me how to fix my lazy nature and become like Anne Hathaway by just sleeping. Today, I want to share a story from back when I was still all about self-improvement. Please listen. It happened about 15 years ago. I had been married to my husband Andy for 2 years, but we were still very much in honeymoon mode. That's because Andy had to go on a business trip alone just 6 months into our marriage. He was selected as a temporary replacement because the person originally meant to go fell ill. I wanted to scream, "Don't disrupt our newlywed life." But being a junior employee, he couldn't disobey his superiors. I wanted to go with him, but we had just married and still had our condo lease. Breaking the lease for a short assignment and then having to find a new place seemed too much. After discussing it, we decided it would be more trouble to go together for such a short time. We can manage being apart. So, just 6 months into our marriage, we ended up living separately. Finally, after about half a year, Andy's solo trip ended, and we could live together again. Finally, we can spend time together. I was filled with the desire to enjoy our newlywed life. But it didn't quite go as planned. Originally, when Andy had to go on his business trip, My mother-in-law, Violet, got angry.
Choosing to separate so early in your marriage, does Monica's love for Andy even exist?
She started visiting our house frequently to check up on us. Let me make it clear, our separation right after the wedding was a mutual decision. We talked on the phone every night and met every 2 weeks. Our love hadn't faded just because we were newlyweds living apart. But Violet believed that a wife should always follow her husband. She thought a wife's fulfillment came from being by her husband's side and taking meticulous care of him. She had a bit of an old-fashioned view. It seemed more like Violet wanted to do these things rather than being asked by her husband. To me, she looked like a self-satisfied, overbearing wife. Because of this, during Andy's business trip,
Monica is probably cheating on Andy by not going with him.
Violet had such misunderstandings. Andy tried hard to clear up these misunderstandings, so our relationship on the surface was fine. But Violet seemed to have grown to dislike me for letting her son go on his own. Given this background, Violet frequently came to our house for what she called daughter-in-law's work check. In short, it was to see if I was properly managing the household and treating Andy right. I wasn't doing anything wrong, so she could look all she wanted. If that would earn her trust, then so be it. First, she would come over unannounced and immediately start inspecting the bathroom and shower, looking for any dirt. A single hair or eyelash out of place meant I failed. She would yell at me if there was even a slight water stain on the shower mirror.
How can it be spotless every day when it's used daily?
I wanted to shout, I work too, you know? But I had to endure. Then the fridge was checked. If it didn't have Andy's favorite foods, she'd get mad. Once, fearing Violet's surprise checks, I kept donuts, Andy's favorite, in stock daily. Andy was happy eating them, but he ended up gaining weight, resembling a donut himself.
That couldn't be good. If I did everything Violet said, Andy might end up with lifestyle diseases.
Realizing the danger, I stopped keeping sweets in the house. Hang in there, Andy, until you lose some weight. But when Violet noticed the donuts were gone, she labeled me as cruel for not letting a tired Andy eat his favorite foods. I understood why Andy said he lost weight when he lived alone. Only I could extend Andy's life. Furthermore, if Violet found leftovers from last night's dinner in the fridge, she got angry.
If you can't even manage portion sizes, that's just basic.
But we're a newlywed couple and not that wealthy. Andy and I, both working, talked it over.
Let's cook meals in bulk to save on household chores.
And Andy finally suggested that. With his unpredictable working hours, Andy could hardly participate in housework. I believed it was fine for whoever could do it to handle it, so I didn't mind. I was more worried about Andy overexerting himself and getting sick. But Andy proposed this idea.
I don't want all the burden to fall on Monica.
He said so. We explained all this to Violet, and when Andy spoke, she stayed silent. But when it was just the two of us, she started saying all sorts of things as if her emotions were exploding. Andy told me I could ignore Violet's words, and even said I didn't have to let her into our house. But I couldn't do that. Whenever Violet came over, she was always waiting at the entrance when I returned from my part-time job. Additionally, she seemed to have become friendly with the neighbors her age, so when I saw them chatting and smiling. Look, she's back.
Ah, Monica, I was waiting for you.
I just couldn't choose not to let Violet in. Moreover, Violet told the neighbors, I'm helping because my son's wife can't do any housework. So, from the outside world, our household looked like a kind mother-in-law and a clueless, incompetent daughter-in-law of the modern times. Violet seemed pleased with the situation. You're lucky to have a good mother-in-law like me to teach you things. Every time she pointed something out, she said that.
Sorry, I don't think so at all. I'm a modern woman, I don't understand these things.
I'd like to tell her that, but then I'd just be playing into Violet's hands. It would only add to the useless daughter-in-law stories she shared with the neighbors. But my patience was reaching its limit.
I know you're newlyweds and new at a lot of things, but you're going to have to learn all this stuff so you don't get in trouble with Violet.
A neighbor said to me, and I felt last night's curry boiling up in my stomach. The neighbors didn't know what went on inside our house, and I hadn't corrected Violet's narrative, so it was understandable. The truth was it wasn't my fault, but Violet's rules were too overbearing. I was working and managing the housework, and more importantly, if Andy was satisfied, that should be enough. After all, this house was mine and Andy's house. But as a newlywed, I couldn't speak out. I would say it now, being stronger. But back then, I was young and wanted to maintain a good relationship with my mother-in-law. I thought enduring it was the right thing to do. I didn't openly refute Violet's words to the neighbors for the same reason. If I did it, I would have been labeled as a defiant young person. That was probably my mistake. Violet's behavior gradually escalated. She started staying for dinner and then overnight. This made it impossible for Andy and me to, well, never mind. Let's save that for a late-night adult channel talk. Haha. Well, for a newlywed couple, having her stay over was truly a nuisance. Even Andy complained that. Even though she's my family, I can't relax with my mom around. That's strange. He was subtly supporting me and trying to prevent friction between me and Violet, so he must be stressed too. I felt sorry for Andy, coming home tired. A few times, Andy said to Violet, "Dad will get lonely, go home." But she said,
"It's okay, James told me to look after things. I'm representing him."
She used the authority of Andy's father, James, to her advantage. Andy's family is an old-fashioned type that believed in the wives should obey their husband's principle. Even at this time of being married, Andy still had some irrefutable disagreements with James. The ingrained senses could be frightening, but for me, getting scolded by my dad always hurt more than by my mom. In short, my father was like the last line of defense. My mother got angry sometimes, but angering my father felt like the end of the world. He was like a mental pillar. That was why I thought I understand Andy's feelings. And since Violet started eating dinner at our house, I had been messing up dinner more often. The breakfasts I made when Violet wasn't around had never failed since we got married. At first, I thought I had messed up, and I think Andy did too. I apologized to Andy. "Sorry, looks like I messed up." But Andy replied, "It's rare for you. Aren't you tired? Take a rest today." But only Violet exaggeratedly complained. "Wow, this is so salty, it'll shoot up my blood pressure." I thought it was salty too, and the taste could raise blood pressure, so I honestly apologized. But soon I started to wonder, was I failing so often? Even when the taste seemed fine during cooking, it would be too sweet or too salty at dinner. I even got checked at the hospital, but there was nothing wrong with me. Could it be? I thought, and on a whim, I made dinner on the day Violet visited and left the kitchen. And that happened just as I suspected. Violet was humming and heavily sprinkling salt into the pot. The strength in her right hand and shoulder, holding the salt, was like she was avenging her parents. She could have surpassed a professional baseball player with that. Humming nonchalantly, she was ruining my cooking. I thought I had to tell Andy. But that night, Andy was extremely tired. He had been doing overtime every day for over 3 weeks, and the project deadline was looming. Plus, our wedding anniversary was the following week, and he was trying to get time off for it. We spent our first anniversary apart, so Andy had suggested a date for this year. Inside, my feeling was torn among wanting him to rest, looking forward to the date, and trying not to burden Andy. That was my recent state. I would talk to him about Violet after the anniversary. While I was thinking this, an incident happened. Of all nights, it was our wedding anniversary. True to his word, Andy took the day off and took me on a date. He wanted my homemade dinner, so when we got back home after the date,
There she was. At the front door, that person was. "It's your wedding anniversary today, right? I made dinner,"
Violet said, showing Tupperware from her bag. As I thought, uh-oh. And looked at Andy, he looked the most resigned. But we couldn't be so cruel as to send away someone who brought food. Andy seemed to be resigned to it too. "Eat and then go home today." He said that and opened the front door. I was so looking forward to coming home with Andy and having dinner. Now the entrance looked like the gates of hell.
God, please protect us.
Violet entered the living room, happily opened the Tupperware, and ordered me to get the dishes. Wanting her to leave quickly, I moved promptly and obediently. Andy seemed to feel the same and helped, but Violet said,
You sit down. You're the star today.
And she moved the chair at the table to make Andy sit.
Wait, what day is this? Isn't the wedding anniversary about the couple? Why is an outsider taking charge?
But I stayed quiet. Of course, it was to send her home quickly. We should work emotionlessly like a robot, eat dinner, and send Violet home. That was the mission for us as a couple. Let's do this. What Violet prepared was Andy's favorite meatloaf and sides. Seeing this, I again thought, oh. Noticing my face, Andy asked me, What's wrong?
Well, I doubled up.
You like meat dishes, so I was preparing a steak with premium meat. I honestly told that. Then Violet exclaimed,
Oh, premium meat. Great. Cook it quickly.
Of course, I hadn't prepared a portion for Violet, but she seemed eager to eat. However, saying no, wait, would just extend the time with Violet in a lecture. I'd rather avoid that at all costs. I should have kept quiet. Despair filled my heart as I reluctantly began preparing the steak. Here you go, I said as I placed the cooked meat on the table. I had other side dishes in mind, but for today, this would be enough. So, I gave my steak to Violet and thought I'd just eat her brought meatloaf and sides.
Thank you. This is special for you, Monica. I made it just for you, always working so hard.
With a big smile, Violet pulled out a large Tupperware from her bag. Looking inside, at first glance, it seemed like a meatloaf drenched in gravy sauce, but on closer inspection, something was off. It was strangely red and shiny.
Wait. Raw meat? What is this, so mysterious and unknown? Why mine was different from Andy's tomato sauce version?
Let me remind you, Violet had a history of turning my cooking into a high blood pressure menu.
Would such a person cook for a wedding anniversary?
I peered at the offered meatloaf for a moment, managing to thank her while buying time. Upon closer inspection, this is. Andy also peeked into the Tupperware, and then at my face. It was amazing how couples could communicate just with a glance.
Andy, go ahead and eat. Yeah, yours looks like better meat, I'll take it. Thanks. What?
Violet's eyes widened at our exchange. Andy didn't hesitate to transfer the meatloaf from the Tupperware to his plate.
You don't have to do anything.
Normally, Violet would say like that, but now, she was just pale and silent as I thought.
Well, everything's ready, let's eat. No, no!
Violet snatched the meatloaf from Andy's hand with a near scream. The moment it fell and hit the floor, there was a thud, an unusual sound for a meatloaf.
This meatloaf makes quite a noise, doesn't it?
Indeed. Did you overcook it, Violet? I asked with a sarcastic smile, while Andy just stared at Violet. She remained silent, eyes downcast at the meatloaf. Hey, Violet.
Why is it okay for me to eat it, but not Andy?
Come on, tell me. Hey. I annoyingly hovered around the stunned Violet. My patience, already thin from her ruining our anniversary, had reached its limit. The thrill of retaliation was unexpectedly exhilarating.
Andy doesn't like tomato sauce. I wanted to make something he likes for the anniversary.
Eh? I like any meat, really. It's a waste, maybe it's still good, I'll eat this.
No, you shouldn't eat something that's fallen.
Violet panicked as Andy casually picked up the meatloaf, talking nonchalantly.
Is it wrong for me to eat what I like?
Right.
It's a shame not to eat it though he says he will eat it.
Oh, Violet, you can eat it, it's okay.
A little bit won't hurt.
Andy's smirk was barely containable, understanding everything from the sound meatloaf was dropped. I almost laughed, but managed to restrain myself.
Maybe it's too big for you to eat?
We have steaks. Should I cut it smaller? Wait here?
Eh?
Oh, I'll cut it then. Right, do that. As Violet flustered, Andy brought the cutting board and knife. Here goes. Let's it cut, but as expected, the meatloaf couldn't be cut.
Oh my, this meatloaf is quite hard, isn't it?
Maybe the gravy sauce is slimy? Maybe it'll work if it's washed.
Great idea.
This was a turning point for Violet, but I headed to the sink with the meatloaf.
Wait. Stop. Please, Monica. I'll remake it. Remake it? How was she planning to do that? Could she really think we hadn't noticed?
Both Andy and I had realized it from the moment it was in the Tupperware. Ignoring Violet's attempt to stop us, washing off the gravy sauce revealed a food sample meatloaf. This is clearly not meat, even without tasting it. Violet, do you make meatloaf out of wax? A family recipe? A secret ingredient? It's a bit too conspicuous, though. I waved the food sample meatloaf next to my face, taunting Violet. So I grew up on wax, huh? You're a wax figure.
Stop it, that's creepy. Kidding.
I know. Violet glared at us with a hateful look as we joked around. Violet, I understand you dislike me, but aren't you embarrassed by such an obviously childish setup?
Shut up! It's your fault for not divorcing despite my coming over every day.
So, I had no idea that she was hoping for a divorce. After all, both Andy and I, though annoyed by Violet, still loved each other. We never even considered divorce, so we didn't raid into Violet's intentions. We only thought about how to get her to leave quickly or how she was a nuisance. Now that I think about it, Violet's method to push for a divorce was incredibly inefficient. You could have just said so. I should have been clear too, like, Violet, you're annoying, stop adding salt to my cooking.
Eh?
Both Violet and Andy were surprised by this. The dinners were oddly sweet or salty, so I spied on Violet after cooking. And there she was, shaking salt like she was vanquishing something. Do you want to shorten your life that much? Violet turned bright red. She seemingly didn't expect that I had noticed. Sing that song again, please. You were humming, right? It was good. Violet glared at me with teary eyes as I egged her on. Humming or talking to oneself is most embarrassing when you know someone heard. Humming while ruining Monica's cooking. Andy glared at Violet.
I can't believe it.
I said, and then.
Why would you go that far?
Andy held his head.
Mom, even if you do such things, I won't divorce. What's the point? You want me to suffer through a divorce I don't want?
Violet looked at him in surprise by a pure question from Andy. No.
It's undeniable, right? It's only because Monica is patient. Otherwise, I might have been divorced.
It was a fair point. In that sense, I should be known as the patient daughter-in-law who endures Violet's unreasonable demands in the neighborhood.
Enough. It's an important day, so please leave. Here, take your wax meatloaf as a souvenir. Wait, Andy.
Violet clutched Andy's arm, trying to persuade him.
Enough. I was really looking forward to today. I finally got a day off. I don't even have the energy to be angry anymore. You've been a nuisance every day, and now you ruined the day I worked so hard for. It's too much. Get out.
Andy skillfully twisted his hand free from Violet's grip and pushed her out the front door. Violet wailed outside, but I no longer feared the neighbors' opinions. There was no turning back now. Andy seemed to feel the same, declaring a redo of our anniversary. He eagerly asked for my cooking. I laughed and replied,
Sure.
Violet's crying didn't bother us. Afterwards, due to complaints from the neighbors about the noise, Andy contacted James, who came to pick up Violet. Surprisingly, upon seeing Violet, James slapped her cheek. I heard that James had always reprimanded Violet, saying she shouldn't visit us too often, that a couple needs their own time to be truly a couple. But she didn't listen, insisting we were happy with her visits. James kept quiet, thinking we were enjoying it, unaware of the trouble we were experiencing. After apologizing to us, James also explained the situation to the neighbors on our behalf. Thanks to that, word spread through the condo, and I was able to shed the reputation of being the clueless and incompetent daughter-in-law. I was grateful for James' intervention. My own words wouldn't have had the same effect.
Thank you, James.
And now, after being scolded by James, Violet stopped imposing on our home. But she harassed me whenever we went back home, thinking nobody was watching. However, James, suspecting something like this, caught her red-handed and averted any issues. Well, not for Violet.
If you keep trying to make Andy and Monica divorce, you can't stay in this house.
James said so and Violet was told to divorce. Thanks to that, we found peace, but I worried about elderly James living alone. So we decided to live with him. Initially, it was out of gratitude, but it turned out to be quite wonderful. He would pick up our son from kindergarten without being asked. And he cooked French cuisine, drawing on his experience as a former restaurant staff. It's embarrassing how well he takes care of us when we should be the ones helping him. Once again, thank you, James. For him, living in a lively home with small children at his age was something he never expected, and he's grateful for it. He's too good of a person, truly a father to be respected. It makes sense why Andy couldn't argue with him, and why his words were absolute in his home. He's always right. No wonder he's absolutely truthful. Even at our home, we obediently listen to what he says. Honestly, it's not like winning the lottery or a grand business success, not the happily ever after you hear in fairy tales. But with not only James, but 2 sons and a daughter, our days are lively, just as James said they would be. Even as a wife who doesn't bother with skincare and is getting older, I have a kind, loving husband who still takes me on dates for our anniversary every year. Oh, I do my share of housework and parenting. Just tend to put myself last, hee. Despite everything, I've come to appreciate the ordinary. It's been 15 years since we were married. We still have the freshness of newlyweds, combined with the comfort and laxness that comes with familiarity, feeling happiness in everyday life. For our next anniversary date, I should work on skincare and getting in shape. I think I said that last year too.